Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We're going into the Journal of Frontiers in Nutrition today. A cool study that came out in late 2025. It is the effects of time-restricted eating, aka fasting, without caloric restriction on blood pressure and cardiometabolic profiles in non-diabetic adults. It is a systematic review and meta-analysis of RCTs, randomized controlled trials. So one of our favorite types of research to break down and put it down into distilled, bite-sized pieces of information and action that we can take being on this Fasting for Life journey. So welcome in if you are new. If you want to know more about how fasting transformed my life, Tommy's life, head back to episode 0, episode 1, give it a listen. It's truly the reason why we do what we do week in and week out on the pod, on our challenges, all the resources we've created, the website, etc., is we want to empower you to be able to take action today to adopt a fasting lifestyle, to lose the weight once and for all, get off that dieting roller coaster, reduce or prevent the need of medications and blood pressure and cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome, etc. All the stuff we're going to kind of unpack here in today's episode. Excited to have you with us. Tommy, I want to give a shout out to the OGs as well, the long-term listeners. Thank you so much for your shares, your likes, your rates, your reviews. And as we do, we like to shout out the 5-star reviews, which we are so grateful that we have the majority of them. But we like to give you the shout out for taking the time to really give us the, what's the word I'm looking for? Not just the gratitude, but the perspective that what we're doing is making a difference and that we're going to keep going. We ain't never going to quit. We're going to talk about fasting 24/7, 365. So, Tommy, a shout out to Redla102. She titles her 5-star review, The Best Nuggets. And I don't think she's talking about chicken nuggets. Oh, wait, she is. Go ahead, break it down.
She said, instead of chicken nuggets, feast yourself on the best fasting tips in town. Frankly, Scott and Tommy's advice on how to make a fasting lifestyle possible in real life ways is applicable to many other life challenges. And the gravy, that's the distilled scientific article synopses with practical applications. Please keep this going, guys. Devotee in New Jersey, Redla. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a devotee, and also for picking up on the fact that, yes, absolutely, we talk about that a lot, not necessarily on the podcast, but sometimes in our own conversations about how, some of the things that we've been through within fasting and building a fasting lifestyle are so applicable in so many other aspects of our lives. And so, taking these skills and, some of the mindset work, some of the overcoming certain hurdles or obstacles, and also becoming a different version of yourself that's more prepared, more consistent, more able to do the work and stick to it because you have a strong why that you're anchored to, and then kind of transplanting it or using some of those skills in these other meaningful ways in your life is just one of the really cool kind of avenues that open up whenever you start to get consistent and serious and, committed to your fasting lifestyle.
So what I love about today's conversation, Tommy, and thank you again, Redla, for the shout out.
Yeah.
This is kind of really the sweet spot that we like to live in. So what does this research study show? What were they looking at? And then how do we apply it? Mm-hmm. Well, the reality is if we're going to look big picture at the state of metabolic health, and we talk about statistics a lot, right? So 88 to 92% of the population has some form of metabolic disease process, chronic lifestyle conditions, heart disease, diabetes, blood sugar, insulin resistance. So if you look at the top 10 reasons for all-cause mortality here in the U.S., 8 of them are related back to some form of insulin or metabolic dysfunction or resistance, right? Which then translates into weight loss resistance. So now we look at the stats for, well, what does the diet, calorie in, calorie out, eat less, move more model do for us in terms of results? Well, in the obesogenic food noise filled world we live in, only about 5% of people lose a substantial amount of body weight and are able to keep it off. And 74% of the population is either overweight or obese. So where do we go to actually make substantial long-term change? Because we like to say we don't want the short-term fix. We want to play the long game. We want to begin with the end in mind.
Right.
So one of the great things about this study is that it was simply the primary objective was to systematically evaluate the effects of time-restricted eating, aka fasting, specifically without one of the tools that fails so many of us, and I say us because it used to fail us too, Tommy, without caloric restriction or calorie counting or tracking. Is that a tool you can use? Yes. Is it a long-term solution that gets results for many? The stats say no, right? 5% of people lose the weight and keep it off. 75% of the people overweight or obese. It's inherently not the number on the scale. It's what's going on beneath the surface from a metabolic standpoint. So the primary objective was to evaluate TRE without calorie restriction or calorie counting on blood pressure and various cardiometabolic markers. So triglycerides, blood sugar, insulin, etc. In a non-diabetic adult population. So the reason that's important, Tommy, is because we were kind of hashing this out before we went live to record the episode. And if you look up the stats on the first domino to fall in the medication prescription bucket. So as we age here in the States, we spend trillions of dollars a year. We are on more heart disease medication and cholesterol medication and blood pressure medication than ever before in recorded history. Yet we have more of those disease processes than ever before too. Now, I'm not saying one causes the other here, and by no means am we giving medical advice in this episode, but having done thousands and thousands and thousands of clinical consults now over my clinical career, I've never met anyone that's like happy to be on the medication or happy to like know that the impending doom, like the if not when, I'm going to have the conversation about a blood pressure medication or a cholesterol medication, because those are the first two, like that cardiometabolic, that metabolic syndrome category are the most commonly first prescribed medication as we kind of see the numbers slowly tick up over the years in terms of cholesterol panel and blood pressure, correct?
Yeah. And, oftentimes it will start with feeling like, oh man, I have a white coat syndrome. I walk into the doctor's office, I can kind of feel, my heart rate, my blood pressure starting to elevate. And a lot of times we'll kind of slough it off. And I did the same thing where I was in my 20s and started to see the number kind of creep up just a little bit here and there. And, it starts to become a conversation thread with your provider a lot of times. And just like you said, Scott, blood pressure is a lot of times one of those first medications. If you meet somebody or you know somebody and they're only on one medication, there's a decent chance it's a blood pressure medication.
Yep. Blood pressure, cholesterol. Right.
Yeah. And absolutely. And the thing about that is it's oftentimes one of the first yellow flags that we can become aware of if we're looking for it, if we're sensitive to it, and then we can take some level of control. So I love this study because we're going to talk about the simplicity of what they did and how impactful it was on their blood pressure and other markers. And so we can take that and we can literally apply that to ourselves, because that perspective can potentially help us to like make a 180, make a hard turn at a potential fork in the road, and where we can prevent needing that blood pressure medication that might take away another level of empowerment and scheduling and physiological balance that we can use within our fasting lifestyle. Because once we kind of start down that path of getting on a medication, the odds are, the statistics say, we're more likely to get another one added on than we are to come off of that original medication. True?
100% true.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of, we're going to do another episode on this, statins causing the weight gain.
Mm-hmm.
And how you taking a statin can actually increase your chances of gaining weight and decreasing your overall metabolic function. Now, are they really good at blocking the production of cholesterol? Yes, they are, but it doesn't come without a cost-benefit equation. Mm-hmm. And the weight gain from statins and other meds, this is right out of the randomized controlled trial data. So this isn't just like, a conversation that we want to have is medication the solution? Well, we always like to think less is more. If we can regain that control and feel empowered that we have a choice, that we don't have the impending doom of like, oh, I'm just going to end up on it anyway, not a big deal, everyone's on it. Well, if you want to get different results, then you need to do something different. And the cool thing about this study is that we're not talking about super advanced, long, extended fasts that require lots of practice, repetition, and a very detailed skill set of willpower and discipline and white knuckling ability to do it. They literally looked at, when we were looking at this study, they looked at 978 studies. They identified 635 people that looked at, get this, Tommy, a time-restricted eating window of 6 to 10 hours.
Wow.
Without restriction. Just simply shortening the window. No tracking, no calorie counting, just shorten the window.
Or just having a window.
Even better.
Yeah.
I think you had alluded to a conversation you had recently with someone about this concept that maybe we shouldn't be eating and grazing all of the hours that we're awake, or what was it? I don't remember the exact context.
Yeah, I was speaking to some close family and a close family friend, and they had been on this track of weight loss resistance and coming to the conclusion that they have a level of insulin resistance. They've been hearing this term, and I have
level of weight they want to lose, and some lifestyle changes they want to make.
Absolutely. And they were expecting me to recommend to them to kind of fix everything and just kind of overhaul everything, talk about every food choice and what's the ideal food plan, meal plan.
Because that's where our brain goes. What's the best diet to follow? What's the best exercise? What's the best fasting schedule, right? That's where our brains typically will go first.
For sure. And they were expecting that I was going to recommend, 20, 24, 36, 40-hour fasts, for them and all of these kind of sweeping changes. And I said, you know what? Why don't you just sit with this for a minute, that we need some compartmentalization of when it's okay to eat, and the fact that we don't need to be eating just every hour of the day. If we're awake for 16, 17 hours during the day, we don't necessarily need to be bringing in food all throughout that time. Let's just start there and go, okay, I'm going to open up the possibility of eating at a certain time, and I'm going to close it off at a certain time. And that way my body's not just constantly almost 24/7 trying to process food with a blood sugar and an insulin response. Let's just start there with some compartmentalization. And once we do that, then we can talk about a few other levers that are going to make a difference. But it really starts there, because if I don't have that, nothing else that I could say as far as like, carbohydrates and insulin response and prioritizing protein and the physiological benefits of going into, the 18-hour mark, the 22-hour mark, as far as your fast goes, none of that stuff is going to stick if we didn't start with just the construct of I don't need to be eating 24 hours a day, or essentially like 16, 17 hours a day, right?
Yeah, especially in today's world too. This is going to sound so much like the old grandpa, get off my lawn, right? And maybe I'm dating myself here as I approach my mid-40s.
Yeah.
But like, I grew up outside, like the neighborhood kids, the parks, the playgrounds. And it was crazy to think back to and I love that we've sprung forward and now we have the extra hour of daylight, because the kids play outside before dinner and then want to go outside again after dinner. So I'm hoping that we just stay here and we stop the back and forth. But I don't know. I'm not keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah,
but anyway,
I'll sign that letter.
Right.
Yeah.
Is we live a much more sedentary lifestyle. Like it's clear. Sitting behind desk, I'm behind a desk right now. I spend most of my time here. I have a walking pad over here. I have a walking trail outside. There are days that I get to it. There are days that I don't, if I don't put it as a priority.
Yep.
But when COVID happened, I remember driving through our old neighborhood, like in the first week or two being like, is there like a parade or a community event going on? There were so many people outside on
I
all
remember
of the
that.
sidewalks and walking trails. And I'm like, now a lot of them were still, staring down at their phone as they're walking along,
Sure.
but and
But
not
it was weird
judgment.
to see everybody outside, though.
It was so crazy. And now guess what? Years later, it's like, oh yeah, we don't see that as much. So it was like this perspective shift for me. So the reality is, if we're going to look at the first couple of dominoes to fall, which is blood pressure and cholesterol, this study with putting soft boundaries, just simply to your point, Tommy, of like, maybe I don't need to be grazing or snacking or eating or saying yes to food all day long. But if we have weight to lose or disease processes we want to prevent or reverse, and we have metabolic dysfunction or weight loss resistance, then we have old attempts with calorie counting and tracking that bring up this, that open the closet and all the skeletons fall out.
Yeah.
So we get stuck in this diet mentality. The cool thing about this study was the time restricted eating wasn't very advanced. It simply just compressed from 6 to 10 hour eating windows from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
The studies looked at 6 weeks to 12 months. So there's some cool kind of trends that you had identified, and we'll get to those in a minute after we go over the outcome measures and share some of the data that really show the consistent effort in not just getting the weight off, but keeping it off and why it's so vitally important.
When we talk about the long-term consistency piece, this study brought me right back to the cognitive dissonance that I had and that we hear a lot from, especially from beginner fasters, but not necessarily, because a lot of us have a history of low and slow, eat less, move more, or maybe you've worked with a nutritionist or a trainer in the past, and it just tends to be a lot that we are reinforced that calories in, calories out. We're going to need a caloric
eat less,
deficit,
move more,
for sure. And one of the first things that they point to in this study is that they excluded any sort of dictated calorie restriction. If a calorie restriction was in the experimental model, in the experimental design, it was excluded from this randomized control trial meta-analysis. And so that's a really good thing, because subconsciously you are likely to have a few less calories when you time restrict your food. And so
we've done dozens of studies on that.
Yeah, but it's relatively modest, and it's also generally not enough to explain the difference in weight, the difference in the fat loss. And so that's
metabolic changes.
The metabolic changes, thank you. And that's the cool part, because the cognitive dissonance is, well, a calorie is just a calorie. And so that's great. And thermodynamically, it's correct. A calorie is a calorie.
But when and how often?
Yeah. And what actually happens with it, your body has to make biochemical choices that happen because of your hormone levels within the body. So your body has options as far as what to do with a calorie. And that's where the math doesn't always add up within your individual body. And that's where insulin resistance comes into play. So just seeing
that's where frustration comes into play.
And confusion.
Yep.
Like, why isn't this working for me? It's working for my trainer. It's working for my neighbor. My doctor thinks I'm not being compliant. What the heck is going on here? And it's because your physiology is different. If you are putting those same calories into a body that has an overactive and overproduction of insulin, then the trouble is that your long-term fat stores are basically have more guarding around.
It's harder
them.
to get to them.
It's harder to get to them. It's much harder to get to them. And so that's the tricky part. But the great thing about this study is that we can see that without worrying about the calories, we just put in some simple time restriction compartmentalization.
Small levers. And
then all of a sudden what we're getting is, sure, probably a modest reduction, accidentally or subconsciously, in caloric load. But what we're also getting is a deliberate decrease in insulin levels over the period of the day. And it doesn't have to be that I'm going without food for even 16, 18, 20 plus hours here within this study. But I'm still getting the beneficial effect of having lower insulin levels across the day.
And that's where the outcomes that were assessed were really cool. So the study was mainly the 6 to 10 hour eating window, no restriction on blood pressure. So systolic and diastolic. But they also looked at heart rate, fasting blood glucose, fasting insulin. They called it FINS, right? Which is, I've never seen it labeled as FINS before. So
yeah, me neither.
Fasting insulin, I mean, I get it. And HOMA-IR, body mass index, and the lipid profile. So HOMA-IR is the homeostatic model assessment of insulin resistance. It's the true gold standard when it comes to insulin resistance, aka weight loss resistance or metabolic dysfunction. So when we look at some of the actual data, and then we'll talk about the trends, when they looked at blood pressure and heart rate, so it was 11 randomized controlled trials. You already mentioned the exclusions. Non-diabetic adults, overweight, obese, stage 1 hypertension, metabolic syndrome, and impaired fasting glucose levels, but not diagnosed in the pre-diabetic or diabetic category.
Right.
So 6 to 10 hour eating windows, no prescribed calorie restriction, 6 to 12 weeks, 6 weeks to 12 months, excuse me. The control group, usual 12 plus, greater than 12 hour eating window, no dietary composition changes in either group. Now, one thing I'll say is these were not done in labs, in a lab research setting. These were done in private clinical practices.
Okay.
So to the conversation of, hey, your doc says exercise and lose weight, and they just think you're non-compliant because your numbers are going up, right? Dr. Fung talks about that in the obesity code, where he was a late-stage diabetic nephrologist, and he was like, wait a minute, either all my patients suck at following my recommendations, or what I'm doing isn't actually helping them. Yeah. Right? There's a break in the construct, the dissonance that you mentioned. So this was me, right? Powerlifter, CrossFit, macros, exercise, weight training, all that stuff, using the equations, and my blood pressure was slowly ticking up in my mid-30s. My central weight gain was ticking up. I could move the needle short-term, but not long-term. Yeah. It got harder to lose the weight, even though I was still doing the same thing I used to do when I fell off the wagon and got back on track, right? Cholesterol panel was off. My wife and I ate pretty much back then Whole30 paleo, made most of our meals at home, went out once a week, had a couple of drinks and a meal. So we got my panel back, and my triglycerides were severely elevated, which showed liver function and insulin resistance. Got my insulin tested. Boom, it was 22. It should be less than 5. Undiagnosed pre-diabetic, right? So I was fighting that push-pull that we talked about earlier. So in this study, related to specifically the blood pressure and the triglyceride and the blood sugar metrics. So there were 11 studies. There was a systolic and diastolic drop in both after looking at all of the 353 control groups. So systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure both came down. Heart rate came down. Glucose and insulin. Awesome. Fasting blood glucose came down. Fasting insulin came down 2 points.
Wow.
Again, this is without any dietary, lifestyle, nutrition changes. This is simply just shortening your eating window, your opportunity for ingestion of food and fuel.
Yeah, and that's a big one because that's a lead measure that doesn't usually get looked at.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So FINS came down, fasting insulin. HOMA-IR came down. Over half a point, 0.6. But that's a big number on the HOMA-IR scale. We've done episodes on that. We won't get into the nitty-gritty details here. BMI came down almost 4 pounds. So modest weight loss despite no explicit calorie restriction. I mean, as long as you're not driving, put your hand up. Who wants that, right?
Yeah. Even the heart rate. So, a couple beats per minute. And, all of these effects were seen, when there was a positive effect, they were seen to be more drastic and more pronounced when someone already had an issue with one of these. If your number was already elevated, then they had a bigger therapeutic effect of this relatively small change of compartmentalizing to a time restricted eating pattern. But the beats per minute on the heart rate, that's something that you can feel. It doesn't take a big change in that number for you to feel different. I remember just having dropped like the first maybe 5-7 pounds and then going up the stairs, like multiple sets of stairs in a row at an office building and starting to reach like that midway point where I would have normally been substantially out of breath at that point and going like, wow, like I have, I feel this a lot less than I would have just a few weeks ago. And
Yep.
so a small change in beats per minute right there is something that you can feel when, especially when you start taxing your body.
Yep. Triglycerides came down. Total cholesterol went up a couple of points, but triglycerides came down, which is a much more important metabolic marker than LDL.
Mhm.
HDL stayed about the same. LDL came down 2 points. So, not a huge drastic change, but where is everything moving? It's moving directionally in the right way.
Yeah.
The scale is moving. And all you've done is pulled one simple lever, which is simply shrinking the amount of time that you ingest food.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's important to highlight too, like if you're already time restricted eating and you're thinking to yourself, I'm already kind of past this point. Like this sounds like maybe
Now we're going to go
beginner
into are you going into the
fasting.
trends here, the timing?
Like yeah, a little bit, but just on the mindset side of it, it's almost like you might be past this more like beginner, like you may not need convincing that fasting is good for you.
Right.
You feel better and your symptoms are lower, or maybe it's going to help you avoid symptoms and or medication in the future. But what really it is to me is like it's a testament to the consistency that we always talk about. Because
Yep.
remember back like holiday season, and we talked about, I think it was it episode 311 where we talked about like the foundational fasting,
Floor,
right?
whatever we called it. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a
The
couple
fasting
episodes
floor. Yeah.
in there where we had like our ideal day goals, and then what is my floor so I don't go to zero. And
Yeah. What is
this
my
is
fasting floor? What is my
yeah.
daily intermittent fasting window that when life is lifing, I can still stick to the plan?
Yes. And so having a 6 hour window, but even if it's an 8 hour or it's a 10 hour window, this is substantially better from just going like, nah, I'm just
I'll
not
just fast
fasting
tomorrow.
today. I'll fast tomorrow. It's so different in that moment when you go into that freelance mentality. It can feel justifiable, but this is like I'm gonna be on the soapbox for a second, talking to myself and everybody else, going, don't let it go to zero. Just have this as your floor, because it matters. It matters physiologically, and every single time you do it, each day that you do it, it does add up. It adds up, and the benefits are additive.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about the time component here
Okay.
of where the biggest bang for your buck was. And obviously, again, we want to begin with the end in mind. But the cool thing about this was mostly by the time you got to about 12 weeks, beyond that 12 week in terms of blood pressure drop, the TRE, the time restricted eating effects, looks more like how much weight slash insulin moved than simply more weeks equals more blood pressure drop.
Okay.
So we know this carrying the extra weight puts an additional stress on the cardiovascular system. But I don't know about you, but most people don't think like, oh yeah, this extra 20 pounds is really causing my heart to work harder.
Right.
Now, if you have 100 pounds, you probably thought it, but
Sure.
15, 20, you're like, okay, yeah. So
Even five, like there's an additional strain,
yeah.
but it's easy to not think about that.
So when you look at the blood pressure specific meta-analysis that's stratified by the duration, at 8 weeks, TRE clearly lowered systolic, but diastolic were small and often non-significant. But at 12 weeks, the diastolic number finally became significantly lower.
Mm.
So if we look at the meta-regression in the paper, it showed that weight loss, not time per se, predicted the size of the systolic drop, and that the blood sugar and the metabolic issues, or the metabolic numbers, the glucose, the insulin resistance, triglycerides, those really kicked in at about that 12-week mark and beyond.
Yeah. So if some of these therapeutic beneficial effects came on at the 4, 5, 6, 7 pounds down kind of range, then what we saw in these trends were that if you can get those pounds off faster, then the therapeutic effect comes faster, because it was a direct correlation, right, Scott? Between
100%.
the weight and then how you felt, or how the actual measurement of blood pressure and these other cardiometabolic markers happen. So that's a really good thing, because that means whether you're just now getting into fasting or you've been consistent, but you're ready to kind of ramp up a little bit, you can do more a little bit faster, see some results a bit faster, and then you'll see the therapeutic benefits follow along with those faster as well. You don't have to wait as long as these folks did.
So let me kind of see if I can summarize it there, because we just said a lot of words. Once you get out to about 3 months of TRE, just this small lever that this article put in place, 6 to 10 hours, no restriction. Mm-hmm. So imagine if you added some quality nutrition food choices and you added some intentionality in nutrition windows, and you did an extended fast periodically, push to the 24-hour, 30, 36-hour fasts.
Yeah.
Right. If you're looking for that type of guidance, you can head to the show notes, click the blueprint to fasting for fat loss, 20-page PDF, got a bunch of info in there and different schedules on how to ramp those up. But even if we weren't doing that, once you get to about 3 months of time-restricted eating, you start to see more consistent improvements in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. And the more weight people lose, the more their pressure drops. And the more changes you'll see in the blood labs and the other metabolic blood sugar and cholesterol panel numbers. Yeah. That's
just
awesome.
And just the fact that you can see clearly the correlation, because the fewer pounds that we have to lose, the easier it is to kind of dissociate the pounds from either the feeling or the eventual what's kind of building under the surface. And so it's good to actually associate the two, because it's actually a driver for better, faster behavioral changes. When we see it that way, we can go, okay, if I just look at the scale and I want to feel a little bit better in my clothes, but I only have a few pounds to lose, so it's just not all that urgent feeling right now. This is a great
which then doesn't feel very motivating.
Exactly. And so instead of this being like frustrating, because we're correlating these other health outcomes with even a smaller amount, like a modest amount of weight to lose, we can use this to kickstart more action even faster, and to kind of really deepen the connection with my why. Why is it that I want to lose the weight? Why do I want to get a little more consistent or better with my fasting? This is a great way. I want to avoid the medications that my parents are on. I want to avoid having the conversation at an earlier age or at all that maybe my friends or family are having to have.
Yep, and that's the reality. So TRE isn't just it isn't like a magic bullet, right? But on so many of the research that we've gone into, and so many of the people that we've seen transform with this process, the trials, and the action that you take with it, having the knowledge and then applying it, it consistently nudges blood pressure, fasting glucose, insulin resistance, all that stuff in the right direction. Especially when you get to that about 90-day mark. Right. And if you already have some metabolic stuff going on, weight loss resistance, et cetera, carrying the excess weight for decades, it's going to make it very practical. Right. It's like a root cause therapy, a foundational therapy. Right. And you can never avoid that dependence on the medical system or the medications that dominate the state of the health that we have here in the US, that chronic lifestyle kind of thing, that situation. So it's not just more weeks equals more results. It's more consistency that equals more long-term results. You'll start seeing the reliable blood pressure and metabolic changes. And the biggest wins, as we know, Tommy, belong to the group of folks that actually lose the weight and stick to this foundational fasting approach. And that's why we believe, and that's why we named it Fasting for Life. It's a lifestyle adaptation. Right? In last week's episode, we talked about consistency. So if you're lacking with consistency, head back, listen to last week's episode. We talk about turning the average and the mundane into the excellent, how we reach those big result-based goals for what we want our life to look like, showing up more confidently, having more confidence around food, sleeping better, being a better dad, husband, more productive at work, whatever that is. And that's ultimately what we want for you. So we are on this journey with you, Tommy.
Yes.
Go ahead and give me an action step.
So action step, so we talked about last week, the consistency, and we talked about that involves taking an action. So even if it's a small one, it's a messy action, it's going to give you a response. It's going to give you a feedback that you can take and take your next action based off of that. So it builds momentum. So in the same way, coming off of this conversation, if you're hearing this conversation, you may not need more convincing that some level of fasting is going to be beneficial, helpful for you.
Right.
Maybe you're already feeling some of those benefits. So what I'll say is that, just like I mentioned, whenever you asked me about that conversation I was having with my family recently, about just change the way you look at the opportunity to say, I don't necessarily need to be having food all throughout the day. It doesn't mean you need the exact same eating schedule or eating plan every single day, but it does mean that you can give yourself permission to say, I'm going to draw some boundaries for myself. Maybe I'll give myself a few hours in the morning before I open up a nutrition opportunity, and a certain amount of time in the evening time as well. So it prevents that slippery slope of grazing where I'm spiking blood sugar and spiking insulin all throughout the day. Okay, great. So what to do next from there? The next best lever to look at from there would be, let me take a look at the actual, what's the latest that my window actually goes to? Because just shifting that window even just a little bit earlier, what you can see, and not in this study, but in other studies that have looked at this, and there's only been a few that we've seen, is what's the difference between having that window end a little bit later in the day versus having it end a little earlier in the day. And the physiological difference is substantial, so that it makes your next fast that much easier, protects your cravings, protects your sleep, and your sleep ultimately drives your metabolic efficiency. So whenever we're getting a good handle on our sleep like that, then we're having a great physiological benefit, and we're likely to see those benefits day after day when we step on the scale as well. So I'm going to encourage you, take the next step and look at the latest that your nutrition window is going to end, and start compartmentalizing on the back end for maximum acceleration of your results.
I love it. I love it. If you're looking for some more guidance on fasting windows and the who, what, when, where, and why of how to put more extended fast or consistent fast into your day-to-day fasting lifestyle, head to the show notes, grab the blueprint, grab one of our resources, reach out to us if you got questions, join the upcoming challenge if you want the sped up version of how to really put this in and to challenge yourself over the course of a week with us daily live on trainings each and every day. Tommy, man, I appreciate the conversation as always, and we will talk soon.
Thank you. Bye. So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.